Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha television. A significant remark on judiciary's intervention in the CBI investigations. A parliamentary committee has stated that the Supreme Court and High Courts have started performing the functions of the lowest rung of criminal justice system, taking over the role of a magistrate. The Parliamentary Standing Committee's observation comes at a time when most of the big-ticket CBI cases, including 2G spectrum allocation scam, coal block allocation scam, Vyapam scam, Veerbhadra Singh corruption probe and Ponzi schemes like Sharda are being either monitored or regularly heard by the Supreme Court and several high courts. So is the judiciary overstepping its brief? To debate that on the big picture today, I have with me Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, KTS Tulsi. Also joining me on the program, Justice Satish Chandra, former Judge, Allahabad High Court. We'll also be joined by Prashant, Bhushan, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, as well as Satya, Prakash, Legal Editor of the Hindustan Times. Mr. Tulsi, I'd like to start with you because you, as we all know, were part of that Parliamentary Standing Committee that made this particular observation. Why did the committee make these observations and under what circumstances?
You see, the point is that in India there is a vacuum. On the one hand, there is a dire need of ensuring fair investigation against the high and the mighty. And on the other hand, this system of monitoring brings in a certain problem. You see, it tends to impinge on the right of fair trial of the accused. If the apex court, if the monitoring is going to start from the apex court, then how can one expect the magistrate or the other trial judge to maintain complete independence and give the presumption of innocence to the accused, which he is entitled to under the Constitution? This is an anomalous situation, we found, that we need to find an institutional answer for this. And Lokpal will perhaps be that answer. Lokpal will monitor investigations and without being able to influence the trial, the concept of the trial, and in accordance with the fundamental principles of criminal jurisprudence, that you are innocent till you are presumed to be innocent till you are proven to be guilty. Now, in the United States, there has been a different kind of an approach. After Watergate, they brought in the law of Independent Counsel Act. Independent Counsel, for instance, when Bill Clinton was the US President, there were allegations of impropriety and illegality or even a crime. And for that, the federal court appoints an independent counsel. Independent counsel becomes in charge of the investigation as well as prosecution. And he is given the funds, the requisite funds for the purpose of investigation by the federal court. Federal court nominated Ken Starr to be the independent counsel. Ken Starr, within 10 days, was able to lay the indictment in the court. And Ken Starr, Levinsky's friend, another lady who said that she has confessed to me that this is what was happening. Ken Starr did not believe it. He said that no, you have to prove it to me. And they wired her up. They sent her on a weekend. She took Monica Lewinsky along with her, and the entire conversation then was heard by the independent counsel in his office. Once he was convinced that yes, this is what the witness is saying is backed up by contemporaneous electronic record, he then conducted the rest of the investigation. In 10 days, he laid the indictment. Right. And thereafter, Bill Clinton, even as the US President, had to appear as a witness and defend himself. Now, that kind of a system leaves the fair trial concept intact. Whereas in India, if we continue with the monitoring by either the High Court or the Supreme Court, it does impinge on the right of fair trial of the accused. It can't be an institutional answer to making the high and the mighty accountable under the law. That is important, that's very important. but we need to find an institutional answer. Lokpal is one, we can give that a try, but certainly monitoring is not the answer.
Do you agree with that, Justice Chandra, that monitoring is not the answer and High Courts and Supreme Court should not get involved in cases on a daily basis like this?
That is true. Why a case, Supreme Court or High Courts are interfering and passing an order for the CBI inquiry or other inquiry? The reason is very simple, that these are the high profile cases and the bosses of the executive, that is the governments, are involved in it. So for the impartial things, courts are interfering. Had there not been the inquiry by the Supreme Court in the 2G, Coalgate, etc., they might have not seen the light of the day. So they have seen the light of the day due to the order of the High Court or the Supreme Court who have passed this on. In UP, this Manrega and other health scheme cases have come to the light when High Court have passed the orders.
So would you disagree then, because the Supreme Court or the High Court is monitoring on a daily basis, then it's not having an influence on the case?
I agree with the Honorable Tulsi Saab that daily monitoring can be checked. But power is given to the courts to interfere, to order for the CBI inquiry. This power is the statutory power and this one. So nobody can take it. This power is given by the parliament. Now the question is day-to-day inquiry. That alternatively, he suggested rightly that some institution may be there like Lokpal. They can do so that court can devote more time for the fresh cases or pending cases, not for this inquiry.
Indeed.
So there is a point.
Indeed. Okay. It's a valid point. We are also joined by Satya Prakash, legal editor of the Hindustan Times. Do you agree with that, Satya Prakash, that, we've debated both aspects of it? Yes, what the Justice is saying is true, that, the Supreme Court as well as Division Bench of the High Court do have the power to, ask the CBI to look into any matter. If the CBI did not intervene, some of these cases wouldn't have gone this far, is what he has to say. Do you agree with that?
That part may be correct, but what Mr. Tulsi said is equally correct. If the Supreme Court is monitoring a case on a daily basis or maybe on a weekly or monthly basis, and a status report or progress report is filed before the Supreme Court, then just imagine a trial court judge who is to examine the evidence and then pronounce a verdict. Because all the time he would be under pressure that may not be visible to you and me, but for a judicial officer at the trial court level, it's difficult to examine a case which is being monitored by the Supreme Court. But having said that, why do we need monitoring or why do we need a Lokpal? The fact is that the police entire establishment works under the political executives, and they are under constant pressure to do certain things which may not be desirable, and they are under tremendous pressure, particularly in cases where corruption is there, and in that corruption some political leader or maybe a minister, maybe some other people, they are involved. And that is why, to ensure that the investigation is conducted in fair and just manner, the courts do take initiatives and they start monitoring. Interestingly, this is Parliamentary Standing Committee report, but when it comes to monitoring, sometimes one political party would demand court-monitored probe against in a case where some political rival is allegedly involved. So this kind of thing is not going to do. What we need is, Mr. Tulsi talked about independent counsel system in the US. In continental part of Europe, in many countries including France, you have inquisitorial system where a judge is also part of the investigation. That would ensure perhaps a better system, but in India we follow adversarial system. What we need is independence of the police system. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court passed the order in 2006, September 2006, police reforms. Nothing has moved forward. Unless the police are independent in this country, the investigation is not going to be impartial, and these kinds of doubts and suspicions about investigation and rest of the things that will continue. The suggestion that the CBI and the Lokpal and the CVC should be reporting to the Lokpal, that's good, because why should you have too many institutions doing the same thing? And if they are doing the same thing, CBI and CVC should report to Lokpal. But then it is for the government to take a call. Lokpal is yet to be appointed, and because such committee members,
Indeed,
they resigned.
it is for the government to take a call. But joining us right now is senior advocate of the Supreme Court, Prashant Bhushan as well. Mr. Bhushan, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. What do you make of the Standing Committee's observations?
No, I don't agree with the observation that Supreme Court or the High Court should not be monitoring these investigations. Actually, unfortunately, this situation has arisen because it has been found that investigations are interfered by the political classes, by the government, by the politicians, etc. And therefore, the police and the CBI, etc. Do not do a credible investigation, and that is why this court monitoring has become essential. And it's not just court monitoring in these criminal investigations, it's also court monitoring in various other social action litigation. For example, monitoring of night shelters. There has been a Supreme Court order directing the government to set up night shelters for the homeless people in the cities. That order is not being complied with, and that is why the court is having to monitor that case in order to ensure that the government eventually complies with that order. So, court monitoring has become necessary when the executive machinery is failing. And as Satya Prakash rightly said, that once the executive machinery is set right, which means that the police systems are set right and the other executive machinery is set right, and they start doing their duty, the need for court monitoring or even court interfering in such matters will disappear.
Well, interesting observations there. So let's go back to Mr. KTS Tulsi and see what he has to say about it. Mr. Tulsi, very interesting observation being made by Prashant Bhushan there. Executive machinery is failing and other machinery is also failing. So, it's become important and it's become, crucial now that the courts really step in as far as some of these high-profile cases are concerned.
Yes, you see high-profile cases and then the executive failing or partisan investigation, all these are regular as facets of criminal law. The question is, are we going to invert the pyramid? Is the Supreme Court going to start playing the role of a police station? If the Supreme Court is the police station and the charge sheet which is to be filed before the magistrate is first approved by the Supreme Court, then what is going to be the fate of those accused? Are they going to get a fair trial in accordance with the constitutional values of innocence unless you are proved guilty? Will they not have, they may not be able to get a fair trial. So this can't be an institutional answer to the problem of unfair investigation and incompetent investigation at various levels. That is why I think that Lokpal, all these observations are made by the committee in the context of Lokpal, that with Lokpal will carry greater credibility. And Lokpal will ensure that Lokpal will have its own investigation wing. The CBI will also function under the Lokpal. So therefore, we are hoping that the police will be independent because it will be part of the Lokpal Secretariat. And we also hoping that Lokpal's own credibility will have an impact on the quality of investigation. And this endeavor is that with Lokpal fulfilling its assigned task, perhaps the need for monitoring will not be so extensive.
Justice, yeah.
As on today, it is true that the investigating agencies are not independent. Political bosses, political leaders are there to influence their investigation. I remember one case, the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court passed an order for the CBI inquiry in the case of the ex-CEO of the Noida. And who came in appeal before the Supreme Court? That is the state government. That there should be no inquiry of the CBI. Yes. If it is so, then how you can expect that there will be independent inquiry when bosses are there? So this is true that either you make the investigating agency independent, totally independent, without any interference, without the control of the executive, then
It is supposed to be completely independent. If you,
but what is the factual position?
yes.
You have seen it. De facto, what is there, in fact. So this is there. So I think that a court, after making an order for the inquiry, should go slow down or maybe delegated this power to other persons to monitor it. Because Supreme Courts and High Courts are overburdened. They have no time. If they will give time for this one, other cases will suffer.
Yes. The point really being, it's a valid point. Everyone on this panel are making valid points, but what's the way forward? How do we move forward?
Well, to the extent that CVC and CBI should be part of the Lokpal, that appears to be a good suggestion, because without having an investigative wing, the Lokpal cannot do anything. So that is, to that extent, I agree. But to take away the power of monitoring from courts, there could be, because courts, they exercise their jurisdiction under Article 142. So that's a very wide kind of jurisdiction. To ensure fair and just, to impart justice, that's a very wider term that has been used. To ensure justice, so that will remain with them. But what is happening right now is, every now and then, all such cases, most of the corruption cases involving politicians, are being monitored by the Supreme Court. I have seen cases monitored by Supreme Court in which prime accused or prime witness has died under mysterious circumstance and court could not do anything. So it is not that monitoring by court ensures that
Not
everything is fair.
140.
Pardon? It has happened in Ghaziabad PF scam. The prime accused, he died under mysterious circumstances in jail, in judicial custody, and nothing happened. And the case was buried. So
And in Vyapam, 45 people have died.
and that is also monitored by the Supreme Court. So what I want to say, the fact that Supreme Court monitors an investigation or High Court monitors an further scam, it was being monitored by Patna High Court.
Yes.
Most of the witnesses, they were eliminated. So this is not going to be a permanent solution. Permanent solution is having an independent body that can supervise investigation in cases. That is why I am saying this suggestion or recommendation of the standing committee appears to be good, but that has to be given a try. But to say that courts cannot monitor or should not monitor any case, that should not be the case. The courts should have this power and the courts should exercise. What I would suggest, that courts should be selective and they should not be exercising this power now and then in every cases. They should be selective. Why? Because it is happening across the country. Most of the cases and the usual court work, there are constitutional matters pending before the hundreds of constitution bench matters are pending before the Supreme Court. The court doesn't have time to look into those matters. They should be devoting more time to such matters, because one constitutional issue decided by the Supreme Court can dispose of thousands of cases. But unless that constitutional issue is decided, that cannot be done. The Supreme Court doesn't have that time. They should avoid getting into all such cases, but they must have this power.
I'm going to take these points that all three of you are making to Mr. Bhushan and see what he has to say about it. Mr. Bhushan, I'm going to go back to what Mr. Tulsi said just a couple of minutes ago. He said that the pyramid is going to collapse ultimately because the courts are burdened. In turn, the CBI is also burdened. And, there's a lot of stress on the entire system itself at the moment with the current system.
No, that is true. So the real solution is to set the executive machinery, the police machinery, the CBI, the Lokpal, to set those institutions right. That is the real solution. Unfortunately, you see, the government brought in a CBI Act which is weak. The act is weak because firstly the appointment of the Lokpal Act, the Lokpal appointment is controlled by the political class, because you have in a 5-member committee, you have the Prime Minister, the Speaker and the Leader of Opposition, and only one Chief Justice and then one jurist appointed by these 4. So the selection is controlled by the political class. And secondly, the investigative machinery is not under the administrative control of the Lokpal. They are forced to rely upon an investigative machinery which is under the administrative control of the government. So these two are very serious flaws in the present bill. I hope that these will be set right, apart from ensuring that there is some transparency in the selection of the Lokpal also. If these are set right, then perhaps we can have a workable Lokpal, and if the Lokpal works well, then there would not be any need for the Supreme Court to monitor investigations or even to interfere in such matters. The need for interference or monitoring is arising only because there isn't a working investigative machinery today or a corruption investigative system in this country today.
Interesting.
Once that system starts working, if the Lokpal starts working properly, then the need for Supreme Court would disappear.
Interesting. That's a very valid point that you're making. Mr. Tulsi, ensure that the Lokpal is in order first, and ensure that the Lokpal Act is in order, ensure that we have a strong Lokpal, and then probably we do not need the Supreme Court or any of the high courts to intervene.
Yes, you see, the committee has recommended that the appraisal report of the Director CBI will be by the Lokpal. Appraisal report of the Director Prosecution also, with regard to corruption cases, will be with the Lokpal. Somehow or the other, the committee has said, because that was strongly being advocated by the government, the committee has said that the appraisal report of Director Prosecution in respect of cases other than corruption cases will be by the Law Ministry. Whereas I think that no, perhaps when this bill is debated in the House, at that time the opinion of the House will matter as to whether, even with regard to non-corruption cases, the appraisal report of both the Director Investigation as well as Director Prosecution of the CBI should be by the Lokpal. That will lend much greater credibility, and the Supreme Court will also place much greater reliance on the investigation which is being supervised by the Lokpal.
We've left with only 2 minutes, so I'm going to get final closing comments from my guests as well. Starting with you, Justice, your final closing comments.
No, it is a good suggestion that after passing an order for the CBI inquiry, the court should keep it away, keeps an bird's eye view, that's all, just to casually look it, and some other agency may monitor it.
Okay. And Satya Prakash, final thoughts from you?
A proper Lokpal with a proper investigating wing. That's the correct solution. But till that time, unless this happens, the courts should have this power to monitor. Otherwise, the political exchange, the kind of influence they exercise over investigating agencies, it will be difficult to get justice.
And Mr. Bhushan, your concluding comments.
Yes, see, the administrative control over the investigative agency includes the power of appointment, the power of transfer, the power of removal, that is the power of suspension, the power of disciplinary proceedings, and the power of promotion. These are the powers which the government exercises over investigating agencies to control them. And these powers, so far as corruption investigation is concerned, the powers over the investigative agency should vest with the Lokpal rather than with the government. Then only you will have an independent investigative machinery under the control of the Lokpal. But as I said, the Lokpal also needs to be independent of the government and the political class in terms of their appointment as well.
All right. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. KTS Tulsi, Prashant Bhushan, Satya Prakash and Justice Satish Chandra, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me on the program and sharing your views on this very subject. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.